Yo, what's good? It's Skano from the Gutter News. We're living in a time where politicized hate speech is regarded as, you know, political commentary, but it's still hate speech. For instance, if I get up here day after day, attacking a certain demographic, whether it be, immigrants, you know, white folks, I shouldn't be surprised if, a large number of people from said demographics stand against me. May you want to see something unfortunate occur to me. I don't mean, they want me dead, but you never know. So, in light of the murder of this right wing commentator, Charlie Kirk, people are saying this is a political assassination, but he wasn't a politician. I guess you could call him a free speech champion. And he has some very incendiary, divisive commentary, when it comes to black people, transgenders, etc., others, minorities, you know. But as I said, he was championed. He was, on the rise, a rising star in a political forum. And from what I understand, what they are saying, because I didn't know a lot about this. I didn't know nothing about him, I'll be honest. So after researching, I could see why, a lot of people didn't like him. But should you be murdered for your views? You should understand that you could be. I don't know why we still live under this fallacy of free speech when we know that ideas, they can be dangerous. Idealism can get you killed, right? I mean, after all, Jesus Christ himself was murdered, crucified for his ideas. And there was nothing politically divisive about the word of Christ. Yet and still, and though there were political factors that played into it, it was largely, his ideas. The same with Martin Luther King. And these were two of the most peaceful idealists known to humankind, right? So there was nothing violent, divisive about what they were, their ideas, but they were killed for them. Now, we're talking about somebody as far as Charlie Kirk, who, if you know anything about him, like I said, incendiary, you know. Now, as I said, this is being called a political assassination. And our government is at war with it's a civil war low-key going on within our government now. I mean, there always was, but this here, it sparked off. Who knows what, is to follow. But we're living in crazy times. When he was giving this speech, now, the shooter, he was shot from 200 yards away. Shooter was perched on a rooftop. This was a professional hit. This was not some, oddball, rando, left-wing extremist. This was a professional hit. That shot, one shot to the neck, to the jugular, 200 yards away from an elevated position. So this is someone who, either they are very skilled with handling firearms, maybe ex-militia. I mean, we could speculate and speculate, but this was not just like some rant. Anybody with common sense can understand it. This was not just some rando. So the implications behind that. But they say they found the rifle, 30-06, a old school 30-06 bolt action rifle. Cartridge, spent cartridge, steel chambered, three unused, unfired cartridges in the rifle. Now they saying they found this rifle in a wooded area right next to the building where he fired the shot from. He being a white male. As far as descriptions go, I mean, they have, you know, images of this person. So, but they're saying that inside the rifle, so I'm assuming they broke the rifle down, took it apart, because they said inside the rifle, they found engravings along the lines of, and this is where I think things are starting to get weird to me, because it definitely seemed like they are trying to push. They said it was something engraved in there along the lines of pro-L, you know, pro-transgender, you know, and they're making this, they're giving a perception, the media, authorities, you know, that this person was from somebody either from the trans community or closely aligned, identifies with the trans community, you know. Now they're coming out and saying, we may have got ahead of ourselves with that transgender, you know, aspect of it. Maybe that's not what the engravings actually mean. You know what I'm saying? So, but the craziest part of this to me, moments before he was shot, now there's a questioner, you know, in the crowd, and they asked him, of all the mass shootings that have occurred in the last 10 years, how many of those shooters were trans? You know, to which Kirk replied, you know, too many. And the answer was 5. They follow up with the question of, well, of all the mass shootings, how many mass shootings have occurred in totality over the last 10 years? Trying to make a correlation that why are you demonizing trans people, saying that one of his stances as far as gun rights, saying that transgenders, maybe they shouldn't own guns because, you know, they tend to be, you know, so this is some of the stuff he will put out. And that's me paraphrasing. And so they're making a correlation that you make it seem like transgenders out here just committing all these mass shootings. It's been 100, 200 mass shootings. I'm just throwing a number out there. In the last 10 years, only 5 of them have been trans. That's the point they were trying to make. You know, so they say, well, how many have occurred in totality? And he says, well, are we including gang members or no? And he's saying that, you know, sarcastically, throwing shade on a black guy, like, you know, just, and this is what I mean, you know, this is what he was known for. So a moment after he answers the question, shot to the neck. Dundada. I find it incredibly ironic that not a moment before, not in between, I mean, not while he's in the midst of answering the question, the moment he finished answering that question, which just happened to be about mass shootings, he's shot in the neck. I'm telling you, the questioner, the person who proposed this line of questioning, my instincts tell me they somehow have something to do with this. Maybe I'm way off. Like I just find it, that's weird, bro. That's really weird. That's beyond ironic. The moment you answer that question, like I said, not in between. So the shooter obviously, you know, had him in the scope. And there's some people, a particular person specifically behind the questioner. There's some weird gestations going on in the middle of this question. It's like body movements. Is this a signal of some sort? It's like, I don't know, man. You know, after the fact, it's a lot of things. If you go through and look through footage, which I'm sure authorities are doing, it's a lot of things that's going to be weird or seem weird after the fact when they may not have anything to do with anything. But what's the odds? Like I said, this person brings up mass shootings. And like I said, not the shooter specifically waits because you in the scope. I could see your mouth moving as the shooter. The moment you answer that question, I shoot. So I just feel like this definitely was a team effort. Like it was definitely a setup. It was definitely a professional hit with multiple people involved. This is just my belief. So like I said, suspects still unidentified, still on the loose. And our government right now is in flames. You got rhetoric coming from both sides, and obviously, how is it that it's us and it's them? In a democracy that's supposed to, you know, stand for all, but it's actually two different governments in our country. The ideology is vastly different. You're either over here or you're over there. There is no in between. And if you're over there, shit is getting increasingly crazy, man. Or maybe it's just that shit has always been this crazy, and it's just that now that we have social media, we can all bear witness to the craziness from our political figures, no doubt. So you got people from, you got well-known figures chiming in on this. And like I said, the general consensus is dude was pushing hate speech. You could call it whatever. You could call it political commentary. But let's be real. It was hate speech. Same applies to anyone. If I get up here day after day attacking a certain demographic, say immigrants, which I have gotten up here and spoken on, issues regarding immigrants, white society, and I build a platform because I'm relatively unknown, but let's say I actually build a substantial platform based off of that. There are going to be a lot of people that support it, but there are going to be a lot of people also who stand against me. So it should be no surprise, Now, it was said that he said he didn't need security. Now, there was some security, but obviously not enough. But how do you guard against a 200-yard shot from a rooftop? Yeah, unless you got force fields. So, as I said, this suspect's still on the loose. The aftermath to this is going to be extensive. It is. So, it is what it is, man. But as I said, I'm not going to get up here and say that based off somebody's viewpoints, they should be murdered. But at the same time, if your viewpoints are, starkly, they are completely opposed to my viewpoints. And not only that, you putting out dangerous rhetoric, and we can read between the lines. We know how this works. When Trump lost the last election and, he pulled out the dog whistle, he incited a full-blown insurrection. His base ran up in the White House, literally looking for blood. So we know rhetoric. We can't sit back here and play these games. Like what the energy we don't put out, there's not going to be, you're going to have to recoup that some way, some way or another. So as it played out, it is what it is. So like I said, I don't need to get up here and say that he was pushing hate speech. I think it's pretty obvious what he stood on. So where we go from here as a country, who knows? Because this country has always been divided. It's just the fallacy of being the United States. but we know it's the divided states of America. And that starts with our politicians, you know. So we're just pawns. But as I said, the right wing, far white right wing, you know, they propped this guy up on a pedestal and they basically sacrificed him, you know. Because as I said, he was not a politician, he was a mouthpiece. But the rhetoric he was putting out, his commentary, was in line with far right, you know, extremists. And they sacrificed him. And by that I mean, y'all fully supported this, the right wing. Y'all stood firmly behind this dude, you know. And they saying that he was a leader. There were so many young people, you know, of the younger generation that looked up to this guy. And like he was there, you know. And that in itself is troubling. It's disturbing. That, and like I said, doing the research on this dude, that someone like him, you know, but why should I be surprised? But what's troubling and disturbing is he was dubbed like the young generation's leader, the next in line. So that tells me that hate, bigotry, racism, it will always be a fabric of this construct in this country because it's being passed on. You know, it's being passed on. That's why it never the ideology. You know, so y'all can sit around and play games and call it political commentary, but and I'm not a I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. You know, I'm an American. So what y'all call political commentary, I see for what it is. And it was hate speech. And like I said, ideas come with a cost. 216 Scano, you already know.